Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that ask about aero and cars and stuff, and you have to think of it as aero is sprung mass more or less. It's pushing down on the car, so you need to be able to control that. Just like you're, braking into a corner, things like that. You're getting that force down. The more aero that you add, the more downforce. So that's another question that we probably would, well, we usually do ask, depending on the type of racing, obviously.
Green flag.
Welcome to the Blind Apex Podcast, where amateur club racers tune in to get faster.
This episode is brought to you by DHWorks Fuel Systems. Use Apex 10 at checkout to save 10% on fueling your passion. To support the podcast, this one or any podcast, share with your friends. If you want to support the podcast directly, go to buymeacoffee.com/the Blind Apex Podcast. If you've been listening to recent episodes of the podcast, we've been working our way down a suspension rabbit hole, probably much farther than normal. In the first couple of seasons, we did high-end stuff, like really high level cursory glances at things, stuff to help us getting moving. But I'm trying to do the best I can, and I'm trying to upgrade. I'm air quoting a little bit, specifically my dampers. You can blame Jackie. You can blame Evan McLaren. You can blame all sorts of people. You can blame Race Setup Pro because they required me to start paying attention to what I'm doing, stay organized, but the goal is really to push myself in 2026. I know what will be holding me back, and I think by 2027 that will not be a problem. So, since I'm just the guy with the microphone, joining me, two gentlemen, literally brought to me by the Instagram algorithm, which led to DMs, emails, and now a podcast. Trent and Brian, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no worries. So how this started, somehow Trent ended up on my "you should follow this person" thing on Instagram. And then we started DMing and talking, and then he reeled Brian in. So let's start with Trent. Give us your background, what you've been up to, and what's your bag in all of this today.
So I come from an RC background. So I love tuning. I love having access to just kind of play around and see what different suspension and different theories kind of play out on a smaller car. You can do way more on a smaller car for a lot less money than you can on a big car. So that's kind of how I came from all this. My dad raced 410 sprint cars. He built his own suspension. He did a lot of different stuff. So I have a lot of background in just kind of playing around. And then I love cars. I love time attack. I love road racing. So that kind of transitioned and sent me down this larger scheme of trying to better understand suspension.
Yeah. And you've been through the process that I want to talk about. I have chosen, I think, pretty much 99.99% there that I'm going to buy some Penskes. And you've already gone through that process. And Brian, where do you fit in this process, in this conversation?
I'm a shock technician for Penske Racing Shocks. About 5 years in now. Basically came from a mechanical background previously and was a car hobbyist and was always into cars and building my own cars. My kid currently races, and the opportunity after COVID came available to become a shock technician at Penske Racing Shocks. It was kind of a no-brainer, and I took that choice, and here I am. I don't have the 25 years experience, 30 years experience like most of the guys in the shop, but I picked up pretty quick and, like to build relationships with customers and get to the racetrack and put all my hobby time into now real life scenario and seeing what it's like behind the scenes and being able to help people like I once was. I was a Penske customer prior to being a shock technician. So I kind of know both sides of the aisle, which I think is beneficial sometimes to know the thought process of somebody on the other side and being able to have that conversation. And then, Trent reached out and we connected, and he went through the process. And from what I understand, I think he's pretty happy with it. And, we want to, cover what it's like to go through the process to order. It's not as difficult, I think, as some people think it is or can be. It's fairly simple. We just, ask for a good bit of information, and sometimes that can be overwhelming.
Yeah. So Trent's been through it. You've been through it. You do it now. And I'm looking to go through it at some point in 2026. I'm hoping, right as the season closes, maybe to take delivery so I can be set up for 2027. I want to kind of cover how I got here. Maybe Trent, you can jump in on how you decided to get to Penske. But let's say I'm on damper A and I need a rebuild or a heavy rebuild with some repair. The bill gets expensive, right? So you go, do you want to buy new ones, right? The ones that are on my car haven't been touched in a dozen years, probably. And so they're going to need a lot of work, or they could be replaced. Well, that replacement comes at a certain cost. And I basically slippery sloped myself from damper A to damper B. Couple $100, 3 or 4 might get me to damper C. And they all come with trade-offs, right? So to get the right kind of price, you could only go to double adjustable single bodies, or, but I want double adjustable remotes, non-piggyback. That's sort of my bag. So I started hunting down that rabbit hole, and I went from the current company I use now. I went to damper B, damper C, damper D. I looked at a lot of alternatives, and a lot of the friends that I trust were running Penske's. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're going to get a race setup, it doesn't matter who you're purchasing from. I think it's going to be a considerable investment. I won't say it costs a lot, but it's an investment, right? But you have to make these decisions, and you have to see if you're willing to make certain compromises. And I don't think I was willing to make compromises for the price. Now, we're not going to talk legitimate dollars because, well, my Honda Civic and Porsche Cayman, the pricing of those two sets of dampers, even the same, what is it, 8,300 double adjustable, would spec the same way, wouldn't price out the same way. Right?
You're dealing with a strut-based car and stuff like that, which gets into a whole different avenue, which anything strut-based is going to be expensive.
Right.
Just because of how intricate the system is. When you're looking at, A, B, C, and there's people that say, okay, well, I'm going to buy this one because it's cheaper. Well, like you were saying, you buy cheap, you buy twice, and that's kind of what can happen. Or sometimes those shocks aren't serviceable, and you don't get, I should say, in my experience previous, you don't experience the hands-on one-to-one like we do with our S3, or just a typical customer that would call in and want to talk to a technician. Anybody can call, and you'll 99% of the time get a tech on the phone with a simple question, a technical question, setup question that will be able to help you. And I just know from, again, my prior to Penske, that wasn't really something that you could call up. And even outside of racing shocks or whatever it is, you can't really call the manufacturer and get someone on the phone and talk to the person that's building your dampers or building XYZ. So we really strive to do the customer support. That's one of our biggest things that we're built around, is the support and trackside support. And we typically get good feedback on that. So that is one big benefit. You spend a little bit more money, but you're getting that added benefit that I don't know or think that you get with some other competitors.
Yeah, and sometimes I would argue that it's not necessarily actually more, but I'm not, depending on what dampers you're looking at, they're actually more than a Penske maybe. So just saying.
Right. Yeah. And I know in Trent's experience, he dealt with. And I had another dealer that's a good dealer of mine who would buy a competitor shock, or maybe not a competitor, a different brand shock, and he would take them and revalve them to his valving setup and then resell them. And by the time he did all that, he was up to the price of our custom built shocks. And let me add that, our shocks aren't just racing shocks. They're we have them on street cars, a little bit of everything. And a lot of people don't know that, but there's people that daily drive on our stuff. We can build any valving curve for that particular setup, but not to jump around too much. But yeah, like I said, my dealer, he would buy this other brand shock, and then he would revalve them, dyno them, and set them up to his curves of what he liked. And I was like, man, that seems like a lot of work. Let's get together. And now he's a really good dealer and does well with it, selling our stuff. And he still, finishes them out. He charges them with oil. He bought a shock dyno. We build and sell shock dynos as well. And he's been doing really well with that. So like you said, the price point sometimes isn't always that great a difference. And from what I'm finding, we're within the realm of when you talk about the product level, we're in realm with most of the other companies, I seem to think, anymore.
That's what it looked like to me. So let's talk a little bit, obviously non-proprietary stuff, but let's talk about what are the core design principles or assembly principles that you guys are using as technicians at Penske that may set them apart from some of the other folks?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is our manufacturing. We now, when I started there, like I said, 5 years ago or so, we had a handful of CNC machines. We maybe made, and I'd have to guess, I don't know the exact numbers, we maybe made 40% of the parts in-house, 50% maybe. Now we're up to probably 80% or 85% that we're making in-house. We added, again, no one quote me on the numbers, but 10 or so more CNC machines, more operators, and we've been pretty much lights out 24/7 on making parts, trying to keep up. And we honestly, we can't keep up as much as we try, just how busy we are, but we're doing the best that we can to, between all our product lines, to keep up. But adding those CNCs have been really, really beneficial. Quality control, and we've been able to keep the demand at bay for the most part. But that would be the big part of, I think, the most beneficial part of what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So by doing this stuff in-house, right, you're eliminating some of the discrepancies that can come when you source from multi-different manufacturers, right? So, your shock shafts you could order, and it could be, not you guys, but in general, like if you ordered a shock shaft in bulk, there could be a, thousandths or more run out, right? There could be issues with it. You guys really take hold of all of that in-house, right?
Oh yeah. Our tolerances are incredible. What these guys can do, the tolerances of what our engineers, come up with. There's a reason they do it. That's why they're engineers. We have multiple engineers that are phenomenal, that work from F1 through IndyCar through all that, are the same engineers that are working on the shocks that you would purchase. Our tolerances are, when I look at some of them sometimes, just, if I'm out in the machine shop or whatever, like, man, that's incredible all the way down, and we're able to hold that. The quality control. Yeah. Whereas if you're outsourcing, you kind of get what you get. You might have a batch of 300 and you might have 200 good parts, maybe 100 that aren't within, plus minus. So we're able to really take hold on all of that. And it seems more efficient than outsourcing. Like you said, with our shock shafts, they have to be thoroughly inspected by our, inspection, made sure that they're, there isn't just a percentage as well. It isn't just, okay, we're going to look at 1 out of every 100. There's a good bit that are inspected. It's a full-time job for inspection. our coding process that's sent out, that's inspected once it gets back. It's just a full process of making sure that all the parts are 100% perfect. And if they're a little off, that's unacceptable, and they're scrapped or not put out to the public. So you can guarantee that everything that comes out of our shop is 100% for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest issues is the way, my understanding, super layman's, right? Me, like Trent, I've built a bunch of RC shocks, right? But in that world, I could easily see like a more complex shock, an adjustable shock. If you were to improperly stack tolerances, you could have some finicky problems, right? Some stuff that you couldn't troubleshoot as well. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, say a body shock, our shock bodies were out and they were too small. You'd have a lot of friction. You build up friction, which everybody wants to get away from friction. Or, some of the bushings were too tight. The longevity would be cut down. And, on your cheaper shock, you might have some stuff that can be that way because they're running a mill of 1,000 parts and maybe they're not inspected. I don't know. Or they're just kind of giving you whatever. They're using a less expensive O-ring, a seal, oil. Our oil is proprietary, built for us. It's the same oil that's in the Indy cars and the same oil that's, in what you're running in your car. So, and that's proprietary, built strictly for us and tested. So yeah, there's definitely advantages to running our stuff and buying our stuff that people don't see, these little hidden gems that we do. And we go the extra mile.
yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about this because I feel like people don't quite understand your actual build approach. Okay. So some companies take a stance on, I will have 20 different lengths or 5 lengths or whatever, and then we will adapt to an application versus building a very application specific. And they all sort of come up with engineering compromises when you're not doing a very application specific build, right? So how does Penske approach that type of shock or damper?
So yeah, it's a good point. You'll have a 6-inch stroke shock, 7-inch stroke shock, depending on what, the application, 5-inch stroke. With our shaft sizes and bodies and making things in-house, we are able to get, most shocks within a 1/4 inch, increments. And then there's droop limiters, extended body caps, extended eyelets, various different things that we use to get the exact length, what you're looking for, and the stroke, if it's achievable. I mean, it's a mono tube shock, so it's not gonna have as much stroke as a twin tube, but most of the time the stroke that people are looking for is more than what they actually need. I had, for instance, a customer that was using another shock and he had to change his upper mounts because that other shock he was using only came in 4 different sizes or 5 different sizes, where our stuff is basic, custom, blended to your application. You would call up, I have X car, I'm looking to do this with it. Usually starts with a phone call or an email. But we'll ask for extended length, fully extended, fully compressed, and then ride height is typically the 3 points that we ask for. And then we take those numbers and we'll probably ask, upper mount widths, dimensions, things like that, which can be overwhelming for some people. We want to make sure that we're getting you the right product. We don't want to send you something that doesn't fit or is rubbing on something. And when you're spending this kind of money, we understand it's a big investment. We want to make sure everything is perfect. So that's kind of how our process is it's a simple phone call. Our website, we have a lot of stuff listed on there. We're working real hard to try to keep that updated. We're constantly updating, product and parts. So it's hard to keep up with it, but we're doing the best that we can. But if anybody has questions, they can always just call. It's an easy phone call.
Yeah, the manufacturers aren't helping you out with that, having to develop brand new stuff all the time and new parts to put on the website, I'm sure. But
Yeah, for sure. It's with all the different markets that we're across. I mean, and our ATV market is great, our motorcycle market, all those different markets that we do. It's you wish there was, a 20. Well, some people would prefer a 24-hour workday because that's still not enough time to keep up with the changing evolution. The technology is the same that it's been with a piston shim stack for 30, 40 years. But there's
Right.
always evolution, and it's a full-time job to keep up with that.
So, Trent, not to leave you out, my man, a lot of people try to use you as the point of contact, right? So I'm going to have you play. I'm going to have you play a dealer a little bit because they reach out to you. What are some of the misconceptions about buying Penske's and speccing Penske's that you've heard lately?
So a lot of people tell me that there's a price range and they're not in the price range. And then a lot of people tell me that they can't get in contact and they simply don't know where to find them. It is such an easy process to go through. There are dealers all across the country. Everybody knows somebody that is on a Penske. You may be intimidated to ask them because they're running, an open-wheeled car or an IMSA car, but that's actually how I made my own connection. I was actually at an IMSA race at Watkins Glen, and I was hanging out and I was taking photos of different cars and just kind of talking to different drivers, and I happened to see a Penske trailer there. So I snuck on and I actually met Steve there, and we were talking about common misconceptions about suspension and linear versus progressive shock movements. And he thought I was a tech for a shock team. And that's kind of how the conversation started. And then he said, hey, where's this shock? And I said, this is all just kind of tips and tricks that I've learned from RC cars. And then one thing led to another, and here I am. But simply reaching out and talking to someone, as we did over Instagram or just kind of finding a local racer, it's really, really easy to get involved with Penske and to start to form that relationship and go through that process. It's super simple. Was that... Hello?
You still there?
Yeah, it's me. I'm a professional podcaster talking on mute.
That's okay.
I'm sorry about that.
Well, I'll actually touch on that there. Trent, I was actually with Steve, which I know you were talking to Steve more, but up there for that. But I do distinctly remember that conversation, and you were saying about these other types of shocks, and then you said about the type of car and stuff, and we told you the price, and I remember you saying, "Wow, that's not as much as I thought it was going to be." And nothing against you. It just, that's the conception that a lot of people have, because for years, it was Penske Racing Shocks, and Penske comes with a strong background of racing. And I don't know if people assume that it's expensive, or they bought them in the past through a dealer and they were marked up expensive, or what, and like I said, making parts in-house now and stuff helps keep our margins better, and we're able to try to keep on the platform. But I do distinctly remember that you were surprised by the price of what they were. And that's what we ask anybody to reach out. If you think our stuff is out of line or you're interested, reach out to any of our dealers. So
I remember on that too. I actually had photos of my car, which is kind of elaborating on this a little bit. I showed photos of my car to Steve. And, one thing that I did differently from the RC car world, you can see a whole track. So you can look at someone's car and see how it's body roll or how it's transferring weight left and right or front and back. And you can kind of look at that and then look at your own car and say, mine doesn't do that. Well, their car is faster. I have to change roll centers or shock angle to generate that same motion and fluidity through a turn. And I remember I pulled up my phone and I was showing Steve, and I was like, what do you think of this? And Steve said, that car looks terrible. And I said, I think it looks terrible too. And he said, you need way more rebound. So that's what kind of sent me down this loophole of what do I want in a shock? And I kind of cheated a little bit. I don't have a driving coach. I don't have anyone to watch the car. So the next time I was at Watkins Glen, I actually found 2 photographers, and it was turn 1. And then I believe it was turn 5 they were stationed at. I said, if you could, Please take rapid fire shots of my cars coming through these turns. I'll buy all of them. I'm not worried about it, but I want to see the weight transfer of the car as it's happening. So I think I paid like $150, which was nothing. And I got something like 75 photos from each corner. And then I actually emailed those into Steve. And I said, hey, Steve, clearly you weren't there to watch the car. What do you think of these photos? And Steve was nice enough to kind of walk me through the process of what he thought the car was doing. And that's kind of how I started looking at shocks. And immediately, the fact that I could communicate with Steve and we were on the same page as what the car was doing really stuck out to me. And then I started looking at the ballpark figure Steve had given me for some shocks. And when you start comparing budget versus street versus professional, there's three kind of categories you can break it into. When you start looking at professional shocks, the prices are negligible between brands for what you get as far as customer service. I didn't want to buy a $6,000 shock that had a 6-week turnaround time from Czechoslovakia. I mean, there are some shock companies that are like that, and realistically, that's not what I was looking for. I wanted a shock that if anything happened, I would have a 4 to 5 day turnaround so I wouldn't miss a race. And I wanted something that, I knew it was quality control. I knew everything was exactly the same. I could pick up a phone number, call in, order my part, and get it shipped to me. And that's what really settled the deal with Penske, was the customer service and the support that I have before I was even a customer.
Yeah, those times may vary. Let me put that out. I mean, I'm not Brian, but I never try to talk time frames because you never know what's going to happen. But you're right. In the bonus for Trent and I is that the Penske shop is pretty close, so shipping or dropping off is kind of an option if necessary, unlike Czechoslovakia or Mother Russia or wherever these things are coming from sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a huge deal. I think the other thing that we haven't quite hit on yet, and I really want to hit on, is you sort of hinted to it, that, these are monotubes in a stack, and we've been working them for 30 years, but not just 30 years with one car, 30 years across open wheel, or longer, right? Like the amount of data that you guys have to back up and educate the techs and solve problems is immense.
Yeah, and I say 30 years because the early 2000s is when like evolution changed in racing, and there was all kinds of, I call it trick stuff that was going on. But I mean, we go back to 1988. So it's been, there's more than just 30 years, but yeah, 30 years is I feel like when it became, electronics became involved, and, different things of fluid dynamics, and people were trying all different stuff. And, Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, we learned a lot from all of that, and it was all transitioned into what we do today and how we build things. And the amount of background and knowledge and data that we have, I think, really helps us to make it a smooth process. Like I was say earlier, some people find it overwhelming when they call even our dealers, which we I'm going to touch on that. We do prefer people to buy through a dealer. If they do have a local dealer, that's usually the better way to go. But we will sell direct. You can call up and buy from us. A lot of times you will get a better price through a dealer, which is the way it should be. We support our dealers. But yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was even going with that. But
you're not wrong, right? So you guys have a lot of background. You have a long reach, right? You can go to the website, which is penskeshocks.com. You have the ability to look up who your local dealer is. My local dealer, literally local, less than 20 minutes from me, he's operating out of his home, and I know he's doing it for the circle track guys, right? So maybe he won't be the most knowledgeable one to talk to, and it may be easier for me to contact you guys through the website, right? But
Right.
Even if you're not, I'm sure your dealers will talk to us. I'm sure your dealers will ship to us. It's not the end of the world, right? If they're not in your hometown, right? So let's talk about actually getting Penske's, the process, right? So say we've contacted you guys or a dealer, okay? What do I need to be prepared to bring to the table? What are you asking for to make sure you can get the best, most accurate information to get us the best shock possible?
Well, our dealers, vary. Like you said, you might have a circle track guy who will maybe service the stuff, but as far as new purchase, and if he's a circle track guy, he 9 times out of 10 he's going to say, it's not my realm, so give them a call. But we would look for, like I said, obviously the type of car, type of racing that you're doing, or just street driving, or what the vehicle is, motorcycle, ATV, monoski, whatever. We do all kinds of stuff. And then we're going to ask your current setup, corner weights of the car, any particular problems that you're seeing now with your current setup, what you're trying to achieve. And then, we're going to ask your measurement, ride height, full extended and fully compressed. And like I said, the widths and things like that. So we're going to ask a bunch of questions to try to dial in exactly what you're looking to do. Or the last thing we want to do is build a damper and send it out to you and you absolutely hate it. And with all the, years of the experience that the guys have and data, I can open up, as Trent was saying, Steve is sports car guy. I can open up his folder and probably find 90% of the time I could find the car that you have or a car that he's done something for that we've had data on. It doesn't mean we're going to build it exactly the same way that we built for customer A or B, because your scenario is going to be different. Everybody is different. They're the way they brake, the way they, and like what Trent said, going back to Trent, he had a lot of photos. So that was able to tell Steve, hey, okay, the car's doing X, Y, Z. And he knew what he needed to try to achieve to get that damper out to him without having to send it back and do a revalve. We will revalve if we build something for you and you completely hate it or you're out of adjustment range. If it's a double adjust and you're full compression on, your full compression and you're super soft on rebound or whatever the particular case may be, we will 9 times out of 10 revalve it to try to get you where you need to be. It's not something we're going to do 15 times over that someone's chasing. But if it doesn't work, we're going to really try to figure out why it didn't work. And if there's other issues other than just the damper itself, whether it's spring rate or, things like that, there's a lot of variables, and the shock is the fine tuning is what I like to say of the whole scenario.
Can I speak on that a little bit, Brian?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a really good example. So my Integra, first off, I street drive both cars. So I can tell you firsthand, they're awesome. Just driving on the street through the city, they ride awesome. They handle any kind of stiff spring rate you want to throw at them. They take them like a champ. But we have 2 different cars. I have a naturally aspirated Integra, and that is more track focused. Because it's naturally aspirated, that's a light aero car. So nothing crazy, very little wing angle, very little splitter. I also have a forced induction. I've got a turbo-fed EG coupe, 95 Civic Coupe. We do hill climbs with that, and that is a big aero car. My father drives that. He's a little bit older, so anytime you see someone that's in their 70s driving a 400 horsepower Civic, it kind of makes you wonder a little bit. And a lot of that was me going back and forth with Brian and Steve and using the S3 program, because my dad is a little bit timid. So where I like my Integra to be highly reactive, where my dad drives, it's rough because it's on a hill climb and there's bumps. So when I went to Brian and Steve, I said, hey, could we take my shock valving, do something similar, but soften it up? I want it a little bit better over bumps. That goes without saying, But my dad, being a little bit older, he likes a car that's less reactive. So if there's any way through steady state and kind of bumps that we could figure out a way to dial the car down through the valving, I would greatly appreciate that. And they did exactly that. So I have the 8300 series two ways on my Integra and the 7500 one ways on my Civic. And the dyno graphs are relatively similar, but on the Civic, it's relaxed. And you can actually even tell that driving on back roads that the car is just way more settled and not near as touchy. So that was a really, really cool aspect as far as the whole S3 program and being able to customize a shock to literally how you want it to react. That was what sold me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure working with you. It was a lot of fun to do that because it's always challenging us into, something. Okay, we'll take this. And when we send most of our stuff out, we send it out in mid settings because that's where we want kind of the sweet spot to be. So you have a little bit of adjustment one way or the other. And we try to hit those points. And when you talk to 8300, which is our remote reservoir shock, the dyno, the digressive adjuster in that is a little bit different than the way our 7500 works. They're similar, but a little different. So you're not going to get the exact same curve, but it was nice to be able to get it to tune in where they liked it and hope that, again, that we hit it on the first shot. And seemed as you guys were, 2 seconds faster or something. Your tire temps were better.
Yeah. Better tire temps, better wear. You were 2.5 seconds faster consistently, absolutely every single hill climb event. And the scary part is my dad is more relaxed. So I can actually tell from the throttle logs, we're not spinning the tires as much. Instead of him feathering the throttle at 75% and kind of punching it, he is hammer down. He is full wood. So I can also see where, hey, these shocks make him that much more comfortable, where now I can go in and I can add another 5 pounds of boost into the car and kind of turn it up, which is really crazy. He absolutely loves them. We're doing a little bit more testing. And then I remember with that too, not only was it the lack of steady state because it's a hill climb and there are tighter turns in the bumps, we also talked about that car runs more aero. If I remember correctly, I don't have the graphs in front of me. Brian, I think we added a little bit more compression, if I'm not mistaken, just a little bit to plant the tire into the ground a little bit more. I don't know if you want to touch on that or not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that ask about aero and cars and stuff, and you have to think of it as aero is sprung mass, more or less. It's pushing down on the car. So you need to be able to control that. Just like you're, braking into a corner, things like that, you're getting that force down. The more aero that you add, the more downforce. So that's another question that we probably we usually do ask, depending on the type of racing, obviously. And you have that, like you said, your dad raced sprint cars, so he's not afraid to be in the throttle. And if he's afraid to be in the throttle, then he's going to be uncomfortable. So you trust the process, and you can trust the car, and that's really a big thing. Is we don't want people to go out there, obviously, and just think that the thing's invincible. But, getting some data is huge. Keep logs of what it's doing. And we love to hear feedback, whether good, bad, indifferent, whatever. We want to know how our stuff is working, what we can do to be better, and and if it's good, we'd love to hear that too. Obviously, everybody wants to hear a success story. So in Trent's case, like with both cars, he seems to be super happy. Obviously, he wouldn't be here, talking with us if he wasn't. I always joke we need to put him on payroll because he's a very good advocate for us, and we appreciate that. And we love to hear that stuff. It's always good to hear good, really good, solid feedback. And, as he said, you're talking to the direct person who built the dampers, which I think goes a long way for a lot of people.
So twice now we've mentioned the S3 program, I believe. That's what I wrote down. Can we explain that?
Yeah, it's our support program that we have. It's something that was put together. I don't know how long ago. Honestly, I don't know the exact dates, but our shock setup and support. And for our customers, it's basically we get you your shock, we help with your setup, and we're here for the support. We will do that regardless with most people, but it's a program that we have that you're in a database, and all your information's there and everything is logged. And then, you call up with any questions, or if we're at the track, we'll help you. It's just being registered and having this database of these people that are in our S3 program. You have the whole team, basically to support you. So you can call up, my car's doing XYZ. What should I do? Is it this or that? We're here to help. Like I said, not that we wouldn't, any customer, but you get a little bit more personalized support.
Yeah. So my thing is, I just want people to know that it's not like a order, answer some questions on a rando sheet, send it in and walk away, right? You're gonna, you are the shock technician. You are asking, you have your entire team behind you. You said you have 5 years experience where other guys may have 30, but that doesn't mean you don't have access to talk to them and ask questions, right? It's a collaborative environment, right?
For sure. I mean, we talk all day, every day in production about all our different projects, whether it's a motorcycle or an ATV or, like I said, anything that we're doing. Some of the stuff is proprietary, and we are on NDAs that we can't talk about. But yeah, we always talk, or if we have a car that's doing something, we bounce it off each other. Me being one of the newer techs there, I'm going to say I second guess myself, but I always confirm that I'm doing the right thing with the guys that have been there for 30 years. And they might come to me with a question or something from my background or whatever. We all just really bounce it up. It is a full team effort. Whether it comes down to the setup, comes down to a price issue, it comes down to parts order. It's very, we're a big but small company. It's a small amount of people that do a big job, and everybody puts in 110%. It's just really, really crazy to see, being on this end of it, how close everybody is and how tight, and how we all just try to blend. I mean, I work on multiple markets, whether it's sports car, or one day you'll be building a motorcycle shock, next day you're working on an ATV shock or this. So it kind of cross blends. And I think that really helps to develop some new stuff, because sometimes you have a guy that can pull something from this market and bring it into sports car, or sports car can go into motorcycle, or like I was saying, the IndyCar stuff taught us a lot. Bring that down and kind of group it all together. And it's really a well-oiled machine on that aspect of what we can get done and achieve. And so, as the customer calling in, you're not just getting that one person, you're getting the whole team behind you, and we're bouncing off. It doesn't mean that we're incompetent or we don't know. We're just bouncing it off each other because we're passionate. And most of us are racers, or have some, like I said, my son races. So most of us are racers or are connected to racing one way or another. And it's just, we understand and try to make it a very, very easy, smooth process.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are cross-discipline. You do everything from, motorcycles to IMSA stuff to, street cars, motorcycles. It's everywhere, right? And your team is able to communicate and evolve the product. And I think that's pretty important. You're not pigeonholed into making street dampers for somebody, right? So,
no, not at all. Yeah. We get the dirt world. I mean, our dirt car guys are great, phenomenal. We've broken records in multiple different stuff. So it's and if we even have our custom stuff that we can do if someone's looking for a custom project or a custom manufacturing special project. Now, obviously that takes time, but if it has, I've done stuff for autonomous vehicles. I've done stuff for, we've done aerospace stuff. It's not just street car dampers or racing shocks. We're a vast company in many, many different things.
I can talk a little bit about that too. Sorry to interrupt. That's one thing that really struck me when we went up there. We were really diving into a one-way shock on a budget 90s Honda that could have massive amounts of aero and lots of horsepower. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking with Brian and I'm going over this with Steve. And I think Dustin was there too. And my dad was in the shop with me hanging out. And I look around and my dad is gone. And that is just kind of who my dad is. He's an awesome, goofy guy. And I can't find him. And I'm looking around and I see him talking to another gentleman. So I work my way over there. And my dad's like, look at these. And I'm looking at this shock. And there's a million knobs on it. And my dad's talking to this guy, and I'm like, "Hello, sir. Sorry to bother you. Dad, come back over here." And the guy goes, "No. He's awesome. He can hang out." And I said, "Oh, what shocks are these? These look pretty crazy." And he goes, "These just won the 24 Hours of Rolex." And I was like, "Whoa!" And he goes, "What project are you guys working on?" So then he actually came over and gave some input to our 7500 series budget one-way shocks for a 95 Civic. So that is where a lot of information from different programs can kind of collaborate. So that's kind of the joke about our car. It's a budget Honda with 7500 series one-ways. They're super basic. They were also set up by the best shock engineers in the world. So when you kind of get that customer service and that data pool, all of a sudden you go, wow, this is a one-way shock that's going to beat most companies three ways, simply based on engineering data and machining tolerances. So when that kind of happened, I was like, yeah, this is my home.
Yeah, and not to kind of just keep beating off the wall, but that when you say, it just struck me there, Trent, with what you said, is some of the other shocks that are out there, people put them on and they look good on the dyno for the first run, second run, third run. But what they don't understand is that the tolerances aren't, as like we talked about earlier, aren't as good. The oil's just off the shelf or whatever it is. And they start to fade out, and you're on the racetrack and your racing heats up, and next thing you know, you have fade and the shock is no, but it looked good, at first. And that's things that we test over and over. And with our proprietary oil and parts and tolerances that we have to keep for, like, as he said, IMSA, I was at the 24-hour this year, and it was awesome. We had really good success there, but all that, like I said, that same parts pieces we don't make lower end stuff for his Honda or any, a Porsche or whatever. All the parts and pieces are the same quality, whether it's 70-75 aluminum or whatever it is. It's the coating that's put on is still the same hard coating that you would get for all those parts and pieces. And I appreciate being able to do this because it's information that a lot of people don't know unless they actually, have a conversation, as Trent did. And we became close, and Trent's been up 2 or 3 times now. And there's always something new, which is cool to see somebody's face, because even working there, it's surreal sometimes of the things that we put out and the things that we design. And it's a piece of paper and turns into, this trophy, as we call it sometimes, because that's what it's starting to look like. The 5, 6-way, 7-way adjustable shocks.
Lord have mercy. That's too many knobs for me. I don't have that in me. But so I'm cruising the website, okay, and I see we know we need to take measurements, and we select which series of shock that we want, and we measure for our length. We provide vehicle information, all this stuff, but it actually leads with piston selection. Okay, mm-hmm. So I don't know a piston for a shock anyway, for the damper, any more than, I don't know. I just don't know them, right? So if I selected one, let's talk about the process of me filling this out, and then maybe you see something incorrect. Is there still going to be like a follow-up conversation? Can changes be made? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say at this point, I wouldn't recommend anybody other than maybe a motorcycle shock to direct order. Well, you can order from our website, because you're probably always you will always get a correspondent regardless of what you do from our website. It's what's difficult about being a custom shock company is we're not off the shelf. So the lead times are typically 3 weeks. Right now we are trying to keep our head above water. It could be 4 weeks, 5 weeks. There's an expedited fee that you could pay if you need something immediate. But yeah, we're not an off the shelf. So, you're going on there and you're ordering and you're putting the piston down that you want. If 100%, if we see something that doesn't really jive right, and we're like, okay, that he shouldn't be using that piston in that situation, you're going to get an email. Like I said, regardless, it's either going to say, okay, everything looks good. Again, the questions, blah, blah, XYZ, whatever questions, but we're going to probably call you and say, okay, why'd you choose this piston? What are you trying to achieve? Is there, something, my buddy just told me to get that piston. Well, why are you having issues? So yeah, you'll definitely going to hear from somebody as to why you chose that. And if it looks good, then we'll send you an email. Hey, it's going to be a few weeks. You'll have your shocks. But I would say 95% of the time, you'll probably get a phone call or an email just asking more questions. And, don't be overwhelmed. It's just we want to get it right. We want to make sure that we get it right. Shipping costs are pretty high nowadays. Everybody knows. So the last thing we're going to do is ship shocks back and forth 5 times because we didn't get the proper information or enough information. So it seems like a lot. Like I said, I the only reason I'm really pouncing on that is because I hear that is, why do you need all that? Why do you need all that? If you're going through this to buy something, it's a big investment. You want to make sure you're getting the right thing. Yeah, I mean, we have 60 some different pistons, but across all the different, we've developed so much different stuff. So depending on what you're doing, we might recommend, hey, go with a aggressive, go with a VDP, go with the high flow. And, I don't want to touch too much into that because it gets real technical. Our website has a lot of information. Our COO, Aaron, does really good blogs on there. There's a lot of information that, sometimes there's not enough in certain applications, but as far as, we don't hide anything. So you can go on there and look at our downloads and find out anything you want to know about any of our products. We put a lot of instruction manuals on there. And if you have trouble trying to find something you're looking for, just give us a call. We'll usually email it to you. But he does really good with these blogs and it explains a lot. So when you're bored, take a couple minutes and just browse through our resources section, and you'll find a lot of info.
Yeah, so that checks a big section of my questions off for you, because there is a lot on the website that will, in some ways, could overwhelm you. So, but it's good to start perusing it, understand what you can, because once you start engaging with your shock technician, you'll be able to speak a similar language, right? It'll help in the clarity. You'll be more prepared to answer the correct kind of questions. And I think that's pretty important, especially when you're not spending money on a race specific damper to have it done halfway. So Be ready, be prepared. And part of that is some self-education, right? I don't know how to adjust a 5-way. Lord, I would hate to see what they would penalize me in Honda Challenge if I had a 5-way. But
that is the other challenge that we deal with is whenever we come out with something that's pretty trick or a little bit, you have to deal with these. It's always about trying to keep everything to budget. So people talk about electronics, trying to do this, try to do that. Well, we try to keep it to the basics the best that we can and make that work, and simple shim stacks because as soon as you come out with something different, it's banned, or to try to keep it within budget of everybody else. Like you said, the 5-way wouldn't be allowed, or depending on what you can and can't do. And then there's some classes where it's, hey, everything is open, do what you want. But we can do a lot of stuff with that 5-way shock or 4-way shock can do. We can do with a non-adjustable. It just can't be adjusted, but we can meet those curves for most of the time and try to get it, what you need it to do.
Okay. I mean, it sounds great to me. I think the ability to make the dampener do, or the damper do what you want it to do, but not have it adjustable can help those folks who are more budget conscious, right? So, like Trent said, you guys got that single adjustable to do what
is
it needed to do.
It's absolutely dialed, man. It is
So-
such a smooth ride on a hill climb, on the street, on the road, and then you put it on a track, and it's like, man, it just works. And it's a single adjustable, so it's a lot more budget friendly than the two-way. Clearly, you don't have the adjustment, but it does work just as good. And I actually want to touch on that, Brian. You brought this up about different shim stacks, and on my 8300 series, we actually ran into a slight problem, and this kind of ties into the whole budget argument, where I wanted two ways. That's 100% what I wanted. That's what I needed to learn about more suspension tuning aspects. And there's a two-way that is not remote, and then there is a two-way that has a remote. And I remember saying, man, well, they're both two ways. I'm going to try to save some money. And I measured out the shock, and I measured out the stroke, and I sent all that into Steve, or it might have been you. And it was an interesting conversation, and I didn't really pick up on it at first, but looking back, you guys were trying to be as professional as you could. I didn't want to spend the extra money for a remote canister. And I remember the conversation, and it was something like, hey, Trent, we can build you a two-way, but we shouldn't. And I remember I didn't quite understand that, and I said, well, what do you mean you shouldn't build it? Does it work or does it not work? And it was, well, yes, it works. It's just not perfect. And, you know, I kind of sat back and I was like, well, it's probably good enough for me. And then my dad happened to hear that conversation, and he said, you're going to tell the best shock engineers in the world that it's good enough? He said, at this level, when you're paying to have a professional shock, they're kind of doing you a courtesy. Just because you can do something doesn't mean it actually should be done. And then I kind of started looking at other shocks, and I kind of started measuring some stuff out. And I went, you know, if the guys at Penske say this, you know, from point A to point B, I need this much room to get this shim stack to fit to perform adequately, I need a canister. But this other company sells the same shock at the same length, but they don't have a canister. Does that mean they're having inferior valving? Are they just potentially pushing out a shock that meets, you know, someone's two-way spec and fits between point A and B? And that's what really stuck out to me, because you would not sell me a shock that was done incorrectly to fit my budget. Instead, you guys kind of worked with me and you said, you know, if it takes a little bit more time, we can work with you on that, but we really want to send out the best possible shock, which means you got to run a remote canister. And that's what really stood out to me about that.
Yeah, and what happens in that case is, like I mentioned earlier, it's a monotube shock. So it has a nitrogen separator piston with the nitrogen separates from the oil. In our 7500 series, which is the non-remote, there's a head valve in there, some call it a base valve, but a head valve and a floating piston. So that limits the amount of stroke. So when you go with that, not to get too technical or lose anybody, but when you go with that, our monotube setup, which is all we sell, because in our opinion it's been proven is a better design, you can lose a little bit of stroke. So if you did that two-way, once you put your compression adjuster up there and your head valve, that sits in the body of the shock, now becomes an obstruction for the piston and the shaft, and it could what we call crash. So we recommend the remote at that point if you need X amount of stroke. That way, that for say head valve now is in the canister, and it takes it out of the shock body, which allows you to have a longer shock and more stroke. And there's some applications where we, like a Corvette, we can do a 7500 single or double on a Corvette. Actually, we can't do a double. We do a single. We don't like to do it because it's too tight, you know, when you go the coilover setup on those. So we try to sell just the 8300, and it's not like we're trying to upsell. It's just because we don't want the shock to fail or crash or do something that it shouldn't do. So other shock companies could have a twin tube, which is an outer chamber, and it flows with nitrogen and oil together, and you can get that stroke because you don't have that head valve. They have what people call a base valve in those. Just a different type of shock, easy to Google up and see. And once you see pictures, you'll understand. So that's the long and short of that, is because of having that head valve on a double. So by going with the single, we have 3 different options. We have a compression adjustable single, we have a rebound adjustable single, and we have an open jet, which controls compression and rebound together, 70% rebound, 30% compression, in that somewhere around that range. I think on yours we did a open jet, so it, for every click it's 70% rebound, 30% compression, but it alleviates that head valve. So that I think was probably the driving force behind that, and trying to talk you out of it. I'm going to say talk you out. It probably couldn't be done knowing the size of your shocks. I don't think we could have even done a double inline on that particular application with the amount of stroke that is needed, that you're not, drooping out and lifting the tire or whatever, or it's crashing on the inside. The last thing, we have shock calculators that have all of our parts and stuff in there, and we can just punch that in and it tells us, okay, this thing's going to crash. So we won't sell it.
That's the main thing that stuck out to me. You guys are capable of building absolutely anything in-house. If I could think of it, you can build it. But that doesn't actually mean it should be done. So that was a real conversation that showed a lot of integrity from the guys at Penske, saying, hey, if you wanted a two-way in this budget, we physically could do it, but that doesn't mean we actually should, because we're sending out an inferior product. So it meant a lot to me that you guys kind of halted the brakes there and took the time to explain to me, this is why we shouldn't do it. That resonates volumes.
Yeah, no, appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to compromise in that way, right? So it's good that you guys have the experience and the shock calculator tool to help you guys identify that early on, so you can educate your customers appropriately. So let's see. I do have a big question, because I sort of ask this from all the suspension gurus that I talk to. Brian, on your side of the house, what's a service and life cycle look like for a Penske?
I think that's going to depend on the application, whether it's a street driven car, a race car. Obviously Trent's brought up the 24 hours Daytona, like the amount of miles that are on that thing in one race. Depends on the application, but we try to say 180 hours or so, if just to keep it like a general simple term. But if you're racing that thing hard every weekend, probably once a year is a good point. Every 2 years maybe. Like I said, our oil is proprietary. It withstands tremendous amount of heat, and it doesn't break down very fast. I've serviced shocks that were from the early 90s that have never been serviced, and they were still functioning. I have to take them to one of the other guys and say, hey, what's this thing? I've never seen this before. Oh yeah, that's what we did in 92. And it's crazy that damper was still functioning. I don't recommend it, but it still functioned. The oil was black. It smelled up the whole shop. It smells like, river water, but it's still on the dyno. When we pre-dyno everything that comes in, do the service, and we post dyno to show the differences. That's one of the factors I should have said earlier, but we on a service, we pre-dyno, we do the service, we post dyno. But some of these shocks that are that old will dyno okay. That doesn't mean they don't need to be serviced. It's just after 30 years of out there racing, and they probably weren't raced super, super hard, but they were still together and they're still functioning. And that's one thing with our shocks is we have a shock that's want to call a lifetime shock, as long as you're not crashed or anything like that. But you take the time, you take care of them, they will last you a lifetime and generations on. We have stuff, like I said, I have shocks that came in and we still have the parts, the same O-rings, the wiper seals, whatever it is. We have the parts to fix the older stuff. Not always, but a lot of times we can dress those things up and make them like brand new, or even upgrade them.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to understand, right? So one other thing that Penske offers is longevity. Okay. So they've been in the game a while. They're going to be in the game a while, longer. And they're not a fly by night. They're not threatening to close their doors, that kind of thing. So I think that's important when you're making this kind of investment. You get the history, the knowledge, the customer service, and then the peace of mind that you guys are going to be around for a long, long time. So,
yeah, at this point, I don't think we're going anywhere with the amount of stuff we have going out the door and the amount of markets that we've picked up on in teams and, all the way up from Formula One all the way down. I don't think we're going anywhere anytime soon. And we, we're really, really, like I said in the beginning, personable with our customers. And that's one thing that, anybody that wants to purchase our stuff, if they know a dealer that's a legit dealer, give them a call. If you don't feel comfortable calling a dealer, give us a call. We might be able to recommend somebody close to you, or we'll just handle the situation. Obviously, if we got, 50 calls a day, we wouldn't get anything done. So we have really good dealers that support us. And I feel like all of our dealers are really, really supportive. And, there's some that sell multiple brands. And, I've just came across some discussion on Facebook about somebody putting information out about different brands and gets attacked by this or XYZ because, facts are the facts and the data is the data. There's, you run the shock on the dyno, it is what it is. And we don't try to hide anything. We're 100% honest. We have no reason to lie. Like I said in the beginning of this, I've been doing this 5 years. Some people think, oh, you don't know enough in 5 years. Well, there's a lot of things I don't know, but I can tell you right now that I know the people that do know. And I will always bounce it off of them. And you learn every day. Even the guys that have been there 30 years that were on the IndyCar team, you learn every day. Everybody can feed off of everybody else. And that's what's great about it.
Yeah, it seems like a great place to work. You make me want to build shocks for a living, but
yeah, come on board.
Trent has first dibs. That's what I heard. So,
oh man, don't get me started. I would love that job.
We're going to put Trent in charge of marketing.
Yeah.
So, all right, gentlemen, I'm out of questions. So is there anything you guys anything else you guys wanted to cover?
Anything, Trent?
One thing that might be kind of fun to cover if you have the time, of course.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw Brian a curveball here, and I'm pretty sure I know what he's going to say. I hope you're ready, Brian.
I'm ready.
In the past 5 years, what have you seen that has changed shock tuning and shock building, both positive and detrimental? And I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to answer for this.
What have I seen that's positive and detrimental?
That's non-proprietary.
Well, yeah, I mean, in general, it's like everything in the world evolves, but every 10 years it cycles back. And our technology has been around for 40 years. And you can constantly change things, but you find yourself right back into that, that same mode. And that's what our piston shim stack. A lot of people, oh, it's old technology. We're going to run the spool valve or this or that or blah, blah, blah. But we don't, if it's not broke, don't fix it. You guys are car guys. So we know the stuff works. We have enough data on it. There's going to be things that are going to be better moving forward with technology. But what we've been doing for so long has worked and has good success. So that's, one of the things I think is really cool to see is how long it's been around and how, like I said, we have 60 some pistons and we use a handful of them. They're all different applications, but it's how long it's been around and how it's still doing the same thing, regardless of how the automotive industry is changing and cars are getting better and this and that. Our technology has been around so long and it still works. The negative side, I would think, is we just don't have enough people to get this stuff done. Like everybody says, you're always looking for 50 hands, and we're always looking to try to, fulfill what we can. I wish we could put orders out in 2 days, but the reality is you're buying something that is custom built, handmade, the USA, by, racers and guys who love racing. And so, the patience is what we ask, and we'll make sure we get you a good product. It's not something you buy off the shelf. You're not going to walk into Penske Racing Shocks and buy a shock right off the shelf. It's going to take some time. Depending on the time of year, it could be a 1 week lead time, or it could be 4 weeks. But it's a big enough investment, I think, that people understand. You get your chassis built, that doesn't take 2 days. You're not going to buy that up. So you're making this investment. It takes time and a good bit of background of what you're trying to do to get it right the first time. And I think we hit that pretty often.
Yeah. Believe in the process and let them work their process. They've been in the business a while. I'm sure it's been refined and darn near perfected. So be patient.
Yeah. And that's what when people call up all the time, well, why shouldn't I buy the competitor shock? You can buy it's your choice to buy whatever you want. We're just going to tell you what we do in our process and our product. We're never going to talk bad on anybody else's product. They all work. Everybody's dampers, work to their ability. It just depends on what you're looking for. And the one thing I can say that I feel that we try to strive more than any other damper company is our support. We're there. So don't be afraid to call for support or help. We'll answer. I mean, I've answered questions on guys that have our other shocks on their car. If I'm not real busy and someone calls me, I don't have your shocks, but I want to, I'm going to order, looking to get, my car's doing this. We'll give them 2 or 3 minutes. We're not condoning, hey, call us for all these setup questions, but we will definitely engage a conversation as far as that end of it.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Brian, Trent, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with the audience, giving us a sneak peek into what I deem the Penske way, right? You guys have a process. You guys have history in the engineering and the dedication and support behind you. So thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
no, I appreciate you having, appreciate you having us, check out our website and give us a call. Don't be afraid to call, ask questions. We're here to help. And I appreciate you having us and getting us out there. We're going to try to engage more. We could sit here probably talking 3 or 4 hours about this stuff, but time's limited. We'll do another one, but definitely appreciate it.
Anytime, man. You guys are always welcome on. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Until next time, keep working on yourself, keep working on the car, and let's get faster.